2022 has had a lot of significant anniversaries in wrestling. 1997, 25 years ago, was maybe one of the most important years for various reasons that's worth looking back at. But 2002, 20 years ago, was a special year as well. We saw the business trying to regroup from the loss of WCW and ECW. Future big promotions begin to emerge, and we see the returns to the big stage of Rey Mysterio, Shawn Michaels and others. As far as historic debuts, 2002 might have a lot of other years beat, with John Cena, Randy Orton and Brock Lesnar all making their debuts that year, all going on to have legendary careers. This video, however, is about another debut, as November 4th marked 20 years since Batista first appeared on WWE Raw. You might be wondering why, with all these other debuts, I'm making this video about Batista. The honest reason is that I just liked him a bit better back then. I'm not usually much a fan of these big, jacked up dudes in wrestling, but something about Batista felt different. He had a charisma to him, and that Sweet Saliva song, and that other Motorhead song, but we'll get to that later. This match was more than just a debut though. It was a repackage, as Batista had actually moved over from the SmackDown brand, in an era where the two shows were considered more separate than ever. David arrived on the May 9th episode of SmackDown as Deacon Batista, the associate of Reverend Devon. For those who aren't familiar with this weird period in Devon Dudley's career, remember when I said that the brands were more separate back then? In the initial draft, the Dudley boys were inexplicably separated, with Bubba Ray going to Raw to take part in the hardcore title scene, becoming Dancing Bubba Dudley, and Devon went to SmackDown to become a Reverend. When Devon first entered ECW back in 1996, his character was based on Samuel L. Jackson's character in Pulp Fiction, a hitman who would quote from the Bible. All that had survived of that aspect of his character by early 2002 was his "Testify" catchphrase. But there was a precedent for the more religious aspect of Devon, so it didn't come completely out of nowhere. I also noticed that on the night Batista debuted, Devon was introduced as Mr. McMahon's spiritual advisor, which sounds like a truly horrifying prospect, knowing what we know about Satan himself. For context, Jim Ross called him that, by the way. As Devon and Batista walked down the ramp, the at this point unidentified animal immediately draws your eye to him, and the oversized collection plate hanging around his neck. This was very much a departure from Batista's last gimmick in developmental company Ohio Valley Wrestling, as the monster known as Leviathan, who actually emerged summoned from the swamp, which was booked by the ultra-serious Jim Cornette, by the way. Deacon Batista's SmackDown run was fairly lackluster compared to some of his contemporaries, with his main role being to help Devon win and to intimidate the front row into parting with their collection money. In the following few months, Batista would have more short squash matches, even defeating the likes of Rob Van Dam and Kane in less than 3 minutes. But like any great Pokemon, Batista was leveling up and ready to evolve. Part of the reason Batista had been brought over to Raw was to be part of a new group that was set to be led by Ric Flair and Triple H. That group would be known as Evolution, and by the end of 2002, each member of the group would hold every title on the Raw brand. According to a recent podcast interview with Triple H, he handpicked the third generation prospect Randy Orton and the newcomer Batista. The point of the group was for the two rookies to sit under the learning tree until it was time for them to become main eventers and leave the group. Orton would be the first one to graduate from Evolution in mid-2004. Then Batista would follow in early 2005, having won the Royal Rumble match. In a very well-built storyline that lasted several months, World Champion Triple H did everything he could to try and convince Batista to challenge SmackDown's champion JBL. But Batista only had eyes for Triple H's belt, and come WrestleMania 21, he would be coronated on the biggest stage possible. Thank you for watching yet another wrestling channel. If you enjoyed this, please consider comment, liking or subscribing.